Chapter 3, Computer and Internet Crime, Part 3 of 4, Trustworthy Computing. The learning outcomes include: define trustworthy computing and describe its evolution. Assess threats to the organization's security. Identify methods to overcome vulnerabilities, and describe the role of education of the workforce in the successful implementation of trustworthy computing. What is trustworthy computing? In 2002, Bill Gates sent a memo on trustworthy computing, describing its strategic importance as Microsoft sought to grow its product and market. Bill Gates said that people had to trust the products in order to use them, and set the goal of trustworthy computing for the organization. Trustworthy computing delivers secure, private, and reliable computer experiences to its user base. Trustworthy computing builds on sound business practices, seeking to design products with security in mind while adding updates as needed to address new vulnerabilities. To move toward trustworthy computing, a strong security system is needed. The system should assess possible threats to the network. Has the organization moved to the cloud, for instance? Has that improved the performance of the organization's information technology infrastructure and increased the reliability of the network? A strong security system should also identify how the organization will handle serious vulnerabilities. For instance, Sony's response to the hack, allegedly by North Korea, was swift, but they were unable to secure the network for weeks, going so far as to tell employees not to use their own phone to check personal email while on the company network. Email messages to and from Sony accounts were in effect shut down, crippling the organization for a time. The third criteria for a strong security system is to ensure that users are regularly updated about risk involved when a security incident occurs, and how to prevent and respond to a crisis. Users should immediately report any suspicious activities to the appropriate people, and they have to know who to contact. Further, when there is a breach of some sort, and there will be a breach, users need to know how to respond, who to contact, and what to do. Proper training and education of the workforce helps to properly plan for such incidents. An interdisciplinary approach involving IS, public relations, marketing, and others is the most effective way to handle a breach. Not responding is a decision in and of itself. Educate the workforce and inform the public when there is a breach, and then close a vulnerability. When trustworthy computer practices are used, the organization publishes policies and procedures based on sound business practices. These policies help prevent security breaches in the first place, employing hardware and software tools. These tools, paired with a well-trained and well-informed workforce, can increase the trustworthy computing potential within the organization. When there is a breach, the IS group must have a clear method of responding to the security incident. Who is notified when there is a breach? Government agencies, employees, customers, and other stakeholders? Possibly the public as a whole should be notified, depending on what is affected and the potential consequences of the breach. While it is tempting to simply remove the vulnerability, it's better to save it as potential evidence in a trial. Activity logs that clearly outline who accessed data, what time, and what they did with the data can help maintain evidence as the source of the breach is traced. Of course, as quickly as possible, you want to contain the breach and get rid of it. Just make sure to keep a copy if there's any chance for future legal proceedings regarding the vulnerability. Finally, you want to recover. Here is where business as normal continues. All systems are accessible and working in the correct manner. Take a look at this very short YouTube video on trustworthy computing at Microsoft. While trustworthy computing is a noble goal, difficulties arise when implementing it in practice. Trustworthy computing first became a buzzword of sorts in the industry in the early 2000s. It's a fairly new concept and it's evolving in response to the changes in the potential user groups. As you see from this figure, in the early 2000s, more people began to have a PC at home. The first viruses, malware were created, and awareness over privacy grew. There were about 6 billion people in the world and about 300 million and growing users. Moving toward the early to mid-2000s, the internet population doubled. With more people came more malicious software, and security and privacy concerns expanded. In the late 2000s, the internet population almost doubled again, with just over 2 billion of the almost 7 billion people in the world connected online. Users were more savvy and expected organizations to protect their data or provide a way to minimize risk if there was a breach of your data. The mobile population surged at this time as well, with another spot for malicious hackers to try to penetrate and another location for you to protect. Another 500 million people joined the internet as we approached the early to mid-2010s, with 2.4 billion of the 7+ billion people in the world accessing information online. Cloud computing exploded, and people expected access everywhere they went. Smartphones and tablets and netbooks and laptops became the devices of choice, with desktops being mostly in the work environment. Big data became important, and being able to access and use relevant data became essential to a business's operation. Customers expected 24/7 availability, wanted to stream music and movies and episodes, and security vulnerabilities exploded in kind. Trustworthy computing is even more important today than it was in the past. It's also more difficult to achieve since you must design your interface for whatever device the customer might use. For instance, as I sit on my couch at home, I'm on my notebook with my iPad and Surface Pro 3 sitting nearby. I have a desktop upstairs, but only use that occasionally when I'm grading papers and want dual monitors. I'm working at home in shorts and a t-shirt, and I'm the new customer employee. Customers don't want to have to leave home to get the data or product or service that they want, and organizations must be trustworthy in their interactions with customers. I expect it, and you expect it, and we have to make sure we do our part to deliver on trustworthy computing goals. To summarize, IT managers continue to need to understand how to ethically make decisions that affect customers, employees, and other stakeholders. Prior to implementing trustworthy computing, IT managers must have a multi-layer process to manage vulnerabilities. Proactive measures to assess and respond to threats is imperative to avoid costly service interruptions and customer dissatisfaction. Trustworthy computing was first introduced to Microsoft in 2002. It builds upon the idea of mutual trust and respect for privacy as more users are connected with more devices. Trustworthy computing evolves and changes as user needs and technology products change over time. The 2+ billion internet users of today have very different expectations than those even a decade ago. Our employees today have very different levels of experience as well, and we want to ensure that they have the proper training to recognize, avoid, report, and respond to potential security threats. If we want to stay relevant and instill trust in our customers, we must continue to strive for high levels of trustworthy computing throughout the organization.